Hey guys, it's Ann Yorks from the Flower Box, and I have a really fun Plant Mom cookie tutorial for you today. This goes with our new Plant Mom cookie decorating kit that you can find in our shop. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to stencil a really cute watering can with a stem leaf handle, a Monstera leaf, a really pretty hanging plant, a potted snake plant, and my favorite cookie I'm going to show you today is the micro garden, so definitely check it out at the end. Let's cookie it up. When I designed this cookie cutter set, I had Mother's Day in mind. So let's start off with this first cookie. This is the watering can, and we're going to be stenciling the words Plant Mom on the watering can at the end. But first, I want to outline this cookie. I'm using a pastel turquoise piping icing with tip number 2 on the watering can. And then the one thing that makes this design really kind of unique is that the watering can has a stem for a handle with a couple of leaves that are going to be peeking out as well underneath a flower. So I outline all of those icing areas, and then I'm ready to flood generously this main section of the watering can. Because I'm going to be stenciling on the surface, I want to make sure that I'm nice and generous with that icing. That'll give me a nice flat surface for stenciling. I usually like to allow that surface to dry for about 4 to 6 hours, just so that it's nice and set up so that we can put a little pressure on the surface of that icing for the stenciling. Let's flood in these remaining sections on the watering can. I'm going to flood in the top lip of the watering can and also the spout. And I'm going to use a dark turquoise to add a couple of little holes on the spout for the watering can. This is just a very dark turquoise color. We're going to be using this throughout the set, but I'm just adding these little itty bitty wet on wet polka dots for the holes on the spout. Now it's time to stencil, and I'm going to pull in my Plant Mom stencil, and I just want to get that clicked into the stencil genie. That'll hold the stencil in place while I'm working. And then once that stencil's clicked in, I can just shift that around on the surface of the cookie to make sure that it's stenciled in the middle. I'm using that dark turquoise, but in the piping consistency. I'm adding it to my icing scraper, and I just want to stencil that icing, sliding that scraper across the stencil, making sure I cover all the areas, and then just gently lift up that stencil genie to reveal the Plant Mom words. Now, once that stenciling has been done, I'm ready to add in some of the details on the surface of that watering can. You definitely want to wait to add these leaves because otherwise the stencil won't sit flat on the watering can. So I'm just piping and flooding those. And then because we've spent some time with wet on wet, some of these extra details, I'm going to keep this detail real simple. I'm adding a piped accent on the spout, and then I'm going to add this pink flower. This is the Baker's Rose icing color, and I'm going to add a little yellow center dot to that flower. And that's it for the details. I feel like the stencil really does all the work on that cookie design, but you can really personalize that watering can or add your own message as well. Now, the simple cookie in this design, or the accent cookie, is definitely this Monstera leaf. Very minimal details on this cookie, and really just outlining it and flooding it in is our main job. Notice I don't follow the outline of the cookie exactly. I bring in those classic dips in the leaves to create that beautiful Monstera shape. And I'm also going to add a couple of holes on the leaf as well, just adding one on each side. And then because I want to see the vein in the leaf in the center, I'm going to flood in one section first, let it completely dry, and then flood in the next section. That'll just create that beautiful dimension between the two sides of the leaf. I am using a leaf green, Chef Master leaf green on this cookie set for a complete list of colors and suggestions on how much to make. Definitely check out the blog post. There's bonus information on the kit page about how to make these cookies. Now, originally I thought I would make my Monstera leaf kind of veiny, and I didn't prefer that. It didn't really look like a Monstera leaf, and so when I finalized the designs for this cookie set, I decided to go with this one with just the single vein down the center and the 2 holes in the leaf. Now, if you're looking to elevate your cookie design, you might want to consider airbrushing the edges. I'm using our new 3-speed cordless airbrush machine. You can find this in shop as well. Just use the link in the description below. And because this unit is 3 speeds, I find when I'm using a straight up airbrush color like this spring green to highlight my Monstera leaf, it is helpful to use it on the lowest speed. So I'm using very light trigger pressure as I go around and highlight the edges. I also highlighted the stem down the center. And it's amazing how just this quick hit of highlight can add lots of beautiful depth and dimension to your cookie design without a lot of extra time or effort. There's no extra mixing colors or anything like that. And it can really bring that leaf to life. Just look at the difference here between just a standard green leaf and the airbrushed green leaf. The airbrushing adds some drama. Now, it wouldn't be a Plant Mom set if we didn't have a potted plant, so I decided to do a snake plant for one of the cookie designs with this kit. As I'm outlining here, I just got a weird pop in the icing, and using the flat side of that pink thingamajiggy tool. You can also find that pink tool in the kit if you're interested in getting one of those as well. I'm using a medium Buckeye Brown for the base of the pot, and I'm using the dark turquoise for the top of the pot, and I'm going to outline each of the leaves on this snake plant using the leaf green icing color. I'm still using tip number 2. Even in these small areas, I find it's helpful to outline these. Then it's almost like a coloring book when I want to go flood in. And just like with that Monstera leaf, I'm going to flood in alternating icing areas, let those icing areas dry, and then come back and flood the remaining leaves. That just creates that beautiful dimension. It creates the natural line between those icing areas. And then it really eliminates the need to go back and add a ton of piped details at the final phase of decorating. Now, this plant was actually inspired by a plant that we saw at a restaurant when we were out to dinner a couple weeks ago. And I just liked the style of the plant and I liked the style of the pot. And so I decided to turn it into a cookie. All right, we're almost done with the flooding in. I'm just going to flood in that center leaf, and then I'm ready to add some details. Just some simple piped lines using that lighter turquoise color at the top. I just find that cleans up the transition where the leaves meet the pot, make it look nice and clean, adds a little more color. And then I actually don't want the base of my pot to look shiny. I want it to have more of a matte and textured finish. I feel like it makes it look kind of earthy and like sandstone. And so I'm just adding a little bit of flooding icing to the surface of that dried brown icing. And I'm just going to tap it down with a round food brush. And I don't need a lot of texture on here. I actually just want a light texture. And so I'm not adding any more flood. That was enough to cover this whole cookie. But once this dries, it'll just add a pretty look to the final pot. Let's take a look at this hanging plant. And this one's a lot of fun because we're actually going to use a specialty tip on this cookie to create the leaves so that we don't have to pipe and flood. I find using those specialty tips really adds a neat texture, but it's also a very quick way to add leaves to a cookie. And this tip is also going to be included in the Plant Mom cookie decorating kit. That kit includes the essential cutters. It also includes the Plant Mom stencil, some tipless bags, the thingamajiggy tool, and 2 specialty leaf tips. All right, I'm just flooding in these different icing areas using a white and gold icing. And then once I have the cookie flooded in and allow it to dry, I'm ready to add some details. Let's start with the knot at the top of the hanging plant. I'm just doing a big dot of icing and then adding an outline like it's the knot at the top. And then I'm going to add the hanging lines on the basket. So I'm just bringing those straight down to the basket. And then I want to add some details to the basket itself. And I want to do this all first before adding the leaves of the plant because this is all in the background. Let's add a little tassel at the base. Again, I'm adding a large dot of icing, and then I'm just going to fill in that little area with short piped lines for the fringe. And I'm using a tip number 2 on all of these. If you want your cookie to have a finer detail look, you can always size down to a 1.5 or to a 1. But just to keep things simple, I'm just using tip number 2 for these details. Now, I find it's helpful to add these piped lines first before adding the leaves. This just sort of sets up where those leaves are going to go. And now I'm going to switch to a tip number 349. This is a mini leaf tip, and it just creates this beautiful leaf shape. So using hand pressure, I just want to give it a good squeeze and then ease off that hand pressure as I'm pulling out the leaves on the plant. If this leaf shape looks familiar, it's because this is the mini version of the leaf tip number 352, which is commonly used in cookie and cake decorating. This is just a mini version, making these leaves the perfect size for the cookie surface. I love how quick and easy it is to add these leaves, no piping and flooding required, and the leaves have a ton of texture too. Now, I don't know if this added detail is super realistic, but I do want more color on this cookie. So I'm going to make this plant flowering, and I'm going to add this pink daisy at the top and use the yellow center as well. I just like how that adds a little bit of whimsical to it. If you don't like that flower, you can just fill in that area with more leaves and just make it your own design how you see it. All right, let's take a look at the final cookie in the set, which is this micro garden. It's kind of this funky hexagon shape, and this is my favorite cookie out of them all. I just love the colors. I love the design of this cookie, plus we're going to be using a projector at the end. So let's start by getting that cookie outlined. I have the brown base. I have the light turquoise on the upper side of the cookie. This just gives me a nice flat area to add these details. I'm going to add the gold piped details. There really is no wrong way to do this, but I'm going to put a template on the kit page so that if you want to use a projector to add these piped lines, you have a guideline. I find that it's a little bit freeing just to do it freehand. For me, I'm just adding these geometrical shapes. They don't need to be perfect, but I do want to allow enough room on the right side there. Notice there's a little bit of a larger opening because I want to pipe some text that says "Love grows here." So feel free to use that template or freehand just like I did. Now here I'm bringing in another specialty tip. This is a tip number 65. This isn't necessarily a mini tip, but it is a smaller version of the traditional tip number 67. It has an extra cut in the tip so that it adds a little bit of more wrinkle to the leaf. It's just a slightly different leaf shape than that 349 I just used. Now I'm going to add some smooth looking leaves, so I have to pipe and flood those. That is a little bit more work, but it adds a beautiful contrast to the texture. At the bottom here, I'm using tip 349 again, but this time I'm just adding sort of this little spiky looking succulent plant, and I'm using that dark turquoise color to add it. It looks so pretty next to that green. And of course, I want a little bit of color on these cookies, so I'm adding that little pink flower there down at the bottom. Let's add a little texture to the dirt. I'm using some flood icing just to fill in some of that negative space in the brown area. All right, this cookie is looking so fun, but if you're looking for another way to use this cutter shape, I made this fiddle fig cookie design. I just flipped that hexagon upside down, added some large wavy leaves, and it just added another cookie design to this fun Plant Mom set. Now I have my graphic in my projector. It says love grows here. I have a tip number 1.5 on my piping bag, and I'm just following those projected letters to add those words to the cookie. I am using a copy cake projector, which is a very simple projector, but there are tons of digital projectors out there as well. They're smaller and brighter, but require a little tech savvy to use. If you're new to projectors, check out the links in the description below for some tutorials on how to use a projector. And you can also find my favorite projectors in my Amazon shop. Again, the link is below. But I hope you have fun adding some text to those cookies. That is the Plant Mom set. I hope you guys really enjoyed seeing all 5 of these cookie designs. If you want to recreate these cookies, definitely check out the new Plant Mom kit in our shop. It includes the cutters and stencils and a few bonus items to make these cookies. I would be so flattered if you recreated these cookies. So definitely tag us on social media at the Flower Box Shop if you make these. I would love to see your creations as well. That's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed seeing these 5 gorgeous cookies. Until next time, happy decorating.